Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Well, so far spoken about a couple of different points of exit, a couple of places where there is the possibility, the most apparent or most accessible opportunities to exit from the cycle of birth and death, or the cycles of compulsive addiction. These are all sort of exchangeable terms. So that samsara itself just means endless wandering. So that same going around and around, repeating the same patterns. This is samsara in the Buddhist scriptural or mythological language. You can call this cycles of addiction in more contemporary psychological language. It's the same, the same trajectory, going around and around, repeating the same habits, the same patterns. And as the philosopher George Santayana famously once said, "Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it." You can remember that. Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. So that's, in a way, a theme for this whole retreat. The endeavor to learn from the past, to learn from our experience. So far I talked about the exit points of using the experience of dukkha itself. This is an exit point from the cycle. How, as the Buddha said, when we experience dukkha, when we experience dissatisfaction, it can ripen in two ways. One is in further dukkha, like that experience of dissatisfaction, discontent, loneliness, alienation, just makes us hunger for another hit to take us away from the discomfort. Or it can, if there is sufficient paramita, sufficient wisdom, sufficient weariness, that it awakens that question: what's the way out of this? I've been stuck on this for so long. I've been repeating this pattern for so long. Well, what's the way out? There must be a way out. And so that experience of dukkha then awakens faith, and as in this particular expression of dependent origination, is called often known as a transcendent dependent arising, that at that point of dukkha, then rather than dukkha conditioning more ignorance and more rebirth, at that expression of it, that particular teaching the Buddha gives, he points out how that dukkha gives gives the conditions, creates the causes for faith to arise, and with faith then leading to a quality of delight, and then that leading to physical and mental ease and contentment, and leading to samadhi and to insight and to liberation. So that is one exit point. And then also I've been stressing the other, the most sort of accessible and visible exit point, that of the link between feeling and craving, Vedana Tanha link, Vedana Pachaya Tanha, the feeling, conditioning, craving. That is another exit point where the cycles of compulsive identification and the cycles of compulsive activity, that cycle can be broken. But another place that we can also break the cycle or be free from that, to free the heart from this endless wandering on, the endless dependencies on different compulsions, is in a sense not to let it start at all, to not let it begin. And in this respect, it's helpful to consider the word nirodha. So here in the chant, as we have, it starts off with avijja, paccaya, sankhara, ignorance conditions formations, and then sankhara conditions consciousness, discriminative consciousness, distinguishing this from that, and then leading on to the arising of the conditioning the six senses, sense contact, feeling, craving, and so forth. And then, as we know, it leads all the way through up to birth, the moment of no turning back. The mind is brought into some state, some object, some feeling, and then we live through the results of having made that commitment, having made that purchase. Then we get the bill. And the Sokha Parideva Dukkha Domana Supayasa experience, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, the dukkha. So then, as we have in the chanting that we've been doing, avijjaya toveva asesa viraga nirodha. When there is the complete abandonment and the complete cessation of ignorance, then sankhara nirodha, then sankhara ceases. Now, usually nirodha is translated as ceasing, and that obviously is a fairly accurate rendition of it. But the word nirodha also means non-arising. So it comes from the root. The root of the word is rudh, R-U-D-H, and so that not only does it mean the ending of something that has begun, it also means the non-beginning of something, that something not arising. So the holding in check, the restraining of something. So, and some of you might have wondered, well, if ignorance has ceased, how come all these others have got to cease after it? Surely, if the ignorance has ceased, then you wouldn't get sankhara, and you wouldn't have to say that it's ended, or that all the rest are on the list. The vijnana, namarupa, salayatana, pasavedana. Surely, if ignorance has stopped, then the others wouldn't have been caused in the first place. And so, maybe some of you have wondered that. Maybe some of you have not wondered that. But I certainly did. I thought, this is strange. How come? Because if that's stopped, why do we even bother mentioning the rest? When you understand that nirodha also means with the non-arising, what that then shifts the translation of the second part. It's saying with the non-arising of ignorance, when there is no ignorance, when there is vijja, when there is knowing, when there's awakened awareness, then sankhara does not arise. There is no arising of sankhara. When there's no arising of sankhara, there's no arising of vijnana, consciousness, of discriminative, separative consciousness, and then there's no arising or concretizing of mentality, materiality, nama and rupa. So, and in that first section, as I was mentioning before, what you have is that sankhara is like the you can recognize that or understand that to be the initial division into subject and object, of this here knowing, of that there, the basic sense of a subject-object duality. There's a knowing here and a known over there, and that in the wonderful expression of Bhikkhu Jnanananda, this very marvelous monk, teacher and writer who lives in Sri Lanka, Bhikkhu Jnanananda, he calls it the Nama-Rupa Vijnana vortex. Put that in your diary. So it's like this image of a vortex. So it starts off with the initial, just the sankhara, the subject-object, the subtle division between this and that, between the knower and the known, and then that strengthens it like a vortex. It gets stronger and stronger until there's a me in here experiencing the world out there, and that so that strengthens through this whole little series of sankhara, vijnana, namarupa, salayatana, pasa, and vedana. That's a kind of strengthening of that inside-outside, subject-object duality, until by the time you get to to Vedana, Salayatana, Pasavedana, and then there's a feeling of me sitting here and you are out there. I'm the observer and the experiencer, and you are the world that I am experiencing. That I'm in here, you're out there. There's this little sort of homunculus of experiencing the and registering the world, and I'm in here being the doer and the experiencer, the actor, and then that's the world out there. These people, these buildings, the summer breezes of a July evening in Hertfordshire. So that all sort of creates the conditions for that sense of division. And so that when we're talking about Nirodha or reflecting on Nirodha, then if we see it as the non-arising, then what you're not saying that suddenly the six senses disappear or feeling becomes absent. When we talk about the cessation of feeling, in a way, it's the Nirodha or the cessation it's losing its solidity. Right? So that's one way I like to reflect on this. So rather than saying, like when you say the consciousness ceases or the six senses cease or feeling ceases, it doesn't mean suddenly you become numb or that you become blind and deaf and that the kind of the sense world just switches off and is absent. Rather, its substantiality ceases, its thingness ceases, and in that moment there's the experience of emptiness, and they're seeing that, oh yes, this is me sitting here, and there's the world out there. This is the shrine room at Amaravati, and here we all are, everyone gathered for this retreat. But actually, in this very moment, you are in my mind. I close my eyes, and I can't see you. Eye consciousness has stopped. I open my eyes, and you reappear. Eye consciousness has been re-established. So what we experience of the world, and this works for all of you too, that you're actually not experiencing the world, you're experiencing your mind's representation of the world. So the world, as the Buddha says over and over, what is the world? The eye is the world, the ear is the world, the nose is the world, the tongue is the world, the body is the world, the mind is the world. What we experience is what our mind, the image that our mind weaves together from sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, that says, boom, Wednesday evening, Amaravati Retreat in the middle of July. And so it's not saying that the whole world is a dream, and it's a kind of solipsistic view of all of this is just a dream that is conjured up, but it's saying that our version, our experience of the world, is conjured into being through the conditioning of our senses, through the activity of our senses. And so when we talk about Nirodha, the cessation of things, when there is no ignorance, then what is ceasing is not it's not that the eyes suddenly go blind or the ears become deaf or the body becomes insensitive, but rather that otherness, that substantiality, that sense of no, but this is really here. This bench is something out there. So yes, there's an experience, but that experience is known in the mind, and that feeling. My finger taps on the carpet and the wood here, and yes, and just as Samuel Johnson, when someone was having a conversation with him about this, saying, you don't really know that. How do you really know that table exists? And he went, kicked the table leg and said, that's how I know. Well, that's fair enough, but the kicking of the table leg or the knocking of this platform, that feeling in my finger, that feeling is known in the mind. The texture of the carpet, that's a sensation that's known in the mind. That those are all put together through mental formations, and they're experienced here. So when there is true vijja, when there is an awakened awareness, then that context for all experience is apparent. Right? So that there is not a forgetting that all of this is happening in your mind. And this is a theme Luang Por Sumedho would stress very, very often. They say, the world is in your mind. We think that we are moving around in the world, but actually the world is in your mind. And when we sort of shift the perspective in this way, right? And this isn't just a kind of interesting mind game, or some sort of a kind of party trick to amuse yourself with, but it's has a radical effect when we shift our perspective and recollect that the whole world is happening in the mind. Then that gives a context to experience and imbues it with a quality of non-entanglement. There's a way that the heart can't get so wrapped up in every experience, in likes and dislikes, when we're recognizing, oh, this is just hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching. That's what's happening here. So this is an exit point from the cycle, is because if we are able to establish the heart in vijja, in awakened awareness, then the whole pattern does not take off. We're not imbuing the felt sense of this moment with a me here and a world out there. That when we see something that we like, we know, oh, this is seeing, this is liking. When we see something that we dislike, oh, this is disliking. When we're experiencing all the different patterns and textures of feeling, there's a knowing, oh, this is what's happening. This is feeling. This is liking. This is disliking. This is comfortable. This is uncomfortable. This is familiar. This is unfamiliar. And so there's a knowing that this is part of a flow of perception, and that's all. That is, it can't have an owner. It's just patterns of nature arising and ceasing, doing their thing. And so, in that clarity and that non-entanglement, there's a supremely easeful participation. So it also, you might think that, well, if I'm supposed to kind of imagine myself as some sort of advanced video camera that's sort of just recording the data of the world, that it can seem like we're trying to sort of numb ourselves or create a kind of abstracted sort of me the recorder and receiver of experience. But sometimes people can pick up meditation in that way, but this is not what's intended, and it's not the actuality. So again, if we use the Buddha's life as an example, so the Buddha was, say, supremely detached and unentangled in sight, sound, smells, taste, and touch, but yet he was extraordinarily attuned to the situations that he was in, the people around him, and he saw what was needed to be said, to be done, or to be left alone, very, very clearly and moment by moment. And so there's a profound attunement and a harmony with things, rather than a kind of dissociated sort of numbness in relationship to the world. So in a mysterious way, when there's this complete letting go of the world, its partner is a total attunement to the world at the same time. And it's rather like in playing a musical instrument, that when someone is really a master of their instrument, when they really play it supremely well, there's both a complete giving of the heart to the piece of music that's being played, and also a sort of letting go of the idea of me performing. The great artists will let go of themselves and not be even particularly conscious of what their fingers are doing, but giving themselves to the music. Then they are as a kind of perfect attunement to their craft, but yet also a self-forgetting. There's a self-relinquishment, and so that there's that similar combination of qualities, both an attunement to what's going on, but also a profound letting go. And as soon as you think, hey, this is going really well, then your fingers hit the wrong notes, and that everything goes askew. So this is a more demanding exit point, to sustain that quality of vijja, of awakened awareness. But I think it's important to understand this is, in a way, the most profound and most comprehensive way. If we the other exit points, there's in a way they're all a little bit further down the line, further down the track. But if we are able to establish this quality of mindful, awakened awareness, then we're much more able to live a life which is fully attuned to the situations that we're in, and to be really avoiding all kinds of difficulty and discord within ourselves and in the situations around us. In the Tibetan tradition, probably a few of you have heard of the practice of Dzogchen, and so the word Dzogchen literally the full title is Dzogpa Chenpo, which means natural great perfection. And that practice, that kind of meditation, is based on this same kind of establishing this kind of awareness. So that the Tibetan word for vijja, or knowing, awakened awareness, is rigpa, and avijja is marigpa. So and they're completely equivalent terms. So that if any of you have ever been on any Dzogchen retreats or read books about that, you'll notice they're always talking about establishing rigpa, or establishing the mind in rigpa. And it's exactly this. It's exactly this quality of vijja, the simple clarity and purity of knowing, a sort of subjectless, objectless awareness, an awakened awareness, a profound knowing. And the more that the mind can be sustained in that clarity and purity of knowing, of awakened awareness, then the more that we are able to say, as I was saying, establish an easefulness and a peacefulness, a clarity and a harmoniousness within our life. It's not easy to do, as we know, because the habits of attachment and entanglement are very profound. But it certainly is doable, and I would recommend that we can, during the time of this retreat and the opportunities that we have together now in this ideal conditions here at the Amaravati Retreat Center, but also in an ongoing way, that we get to see the value of how great are the blessings that come from establishing that quality of awareness, and how we can, say, not allow the conditions or the situation of the compulsions and the habitual attachments to arise. That the more, just to see for ourselves more and more clearly how the more wise and awake, the more fully and firmly that quality of awareness of vijja is established, then the easier it is not to get into trouble, to not create the situations where we are causing confusion and difficulty for ourselves, and then consequently for the people around us. One of the questions that came up in the group interview the other day was again, contemplating also the teaching on the unconditioned, and how I've been saying how that the Dhamma is the foundation of our experience. We have these reflections on the unborn, the unconditioned, the uncreated, and because there is the unborn, the unconditioned, the uncreated, then escape from the born, the conditioned, the created is possible. And so that that is the basis of our experience, the quality of being, and the reality of all that we are and all that is experienced. So the question comes up: so if everything is if there is this fundamental reality of the unborn, the unconditioned, and uncreated, so how did this all get going in the first place? And funnily enough, I was kind of thinking about Dzogchen. There's this one of the great Dzogchen masters, and who is a Lama who was the head of the Nyingma lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, Dujom Rinpoche, who was, quite by chance, the very first Buddhist teacher I ever met when I was 19 and a student in London University. A friend of mine took me along to this weekend of teachings, and it was being given by His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche. And actually, this exchange might have happened at that weekend, but I was so kind of out of it that I can't remember if it happened there. But certainly, there's this record of this exchange taking place, because the student one day asks Dudjom Rinpoche, "So Rinpoche, if everything is pure and perfect from the beginning, if there is this fundamental reality, the Dharma, which is the basis and foundation of all things, and it's utterly pure and perfect in all dimensions, in all aspects from the very start, how did this whole thing begin?" To which Rinpoche responded, "Did it?" Which I think is the perfect answer. And so it's interesting to consider, but it's also interesting to consider how the Buddha pretty much specifically laid aside most metaphysical questions. So in his own lifetime, when people would ask him, "So how did this whole thing begin in the first place?" he'd say, one of the imponderable things, the Achinteya, is the ultimate beginning of things. He says, the thinking mind cannot encompass the reality, so there's no point even trying. So it's one of the four Achinteya, the four imponderables. The other three are all the workings of karma, the range of the mind of a Buddha, and all of the different levels of meditative concentration. These are the four Achinteya, the imponderables. So if you try and think about them, or you try and figure them out conceptually, you'll either go crazy or your head will explode. So, in other words, don't bother. But it's interesting though that when and I think Ajahn Jitapala the other day was offering some reflections about the relationship between the biblical story of Genesis and the creation of the world and what you have in the Paticca Samuppada. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, because you've got the relationship between ultimate reality, God the Creator, and then craving, desire, the apple, and suffering. All the days of your life you'll till the earth with sweat from your brow and bring forth children in pain. Adam and Eve condemned to difficulty is a sort of biblical format. But it's very interesting how even though the Buddha does in the scriptures, in his teachings, he says, well, if you want to know how a world begins, then it's like this. If you look at the Aganya Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses, then the Buddha says, if you want to know how a universe begins, when a universe starts, it's like this. And he describes how at the beginning of a kalpa, then all beings are born in the Abhasara Brahma realms and higher up, and then as the universe comes into being, then beings reappear in lower and lower realms, and the whole sort of range of entities, beings sort of manifest and kind of reaches its cycle, and the beings sort of develop to a greater and greater coarseness, and the lifespan gets shorter and shorter, and then the universe starts contracting again, and then you come to the end of the eon, and the whole universe dissolves in fire, and then all beings are reborn up in the Brahma realms. And so that's how a universe you get a big bang, and it reaches a limit, and then you have a big crunch, and that's how a universe does its thing. So you do have a creation story and a sort of and a grand finale story in the scriptures, but the Buddha doesn't really doesn't really have much significance in Buddhist teachings. That many people from Buddhist countries wouldn't even know of that story, or oh yeah, right, I did hear about that. So it's not like a central myth. It's not something that's particularly significant, which is I find is quite curious and unique in Buddhist tradition, because all around the world, most spiritual traditions, every culture, whether it's a kind of theistic culture around a single creator God, or you have an animistic culture, or all the different religious forms that you have, and polytheistic, monotheistic, animistic, and that pretty much every culture has an origin story, where we came from. So that, and these are the key questions that are asked in pretty much every religious form: is where did we come from? Question number one. Question number two: where are we going? And question number three: what am I supposed to do now? So pretty much, this is a sweeping statement, I realise, but maybe I'm kind of getting delirious from the heat. But basically, I'd say all religions they answer these three questions: where did we come from? Where are we going? And what am I supposed to do now? And so that in some way, shape, or form, the religions they answer those questions. Like, well, this is how we all came here. This is how this group, our lot, came into being. And so in the Bible, you have the story of Genesis. In the Upanishads and the Vedas, you have their own stories, and every other religion has their own little tales of how us lot, human beings and the animals and birds and fishes, got here. And then you have some kind of predictions for the future. Either sort of say in the Judeo-Christian forms, that being sort of one with summoned up into heaven and becoming one with the Lord forever, or and even in the Northern Buddhist legends, you have the idea of all beings becoming Buddhas in the future. There's some kind of sort of messianic age off in some different realm, but at least some kind of prediction of what will happen to us and where we will go if we get it right or if we get it wrong. And then also in terms of how we're supposed to live, what does the experience of the mythological past and the mythological future, how does that show us? What's the best way to live? How should we best operate as a human being? So what's very intriguing is that in the Buddhist teachings of the Theravada world, the Buddha puts all that aside. And as I said, you have the Aganya Sutta talking about this sort of how a Big Bang and how a universe comes into being and how things evolve. But that really not much is made of that. But instead, the Buddha addresses those very issues through Paticcasamuppada. That rather than talking about things on a sort of cosmological scale, well, rather than how did humans arise, let's talk about how dukkha arises. And rather where we're all going off into some far distant future or some other realms of being, let's talk about the possibility of dukkha ceasing. That's the scope that we're looking at. And then what we're supposed to do now is that there in Paticcasamuppada it talks about how with the complete ending of ignorance, and we can see how that ending of dukkha is fully and completely brought about. So to me this really characterizes one of the most powerful and useful aspects of the Theravada tradition. Of course I'm completely biased, I fully confess. I am not unbiased, but to me this is a great strength and a tremendous, tremendously practical tool that the Buddha offers us, because he was fully aware of all the different stories and mythologies that were around, and also he had a vastly comprehensive knowledge of how things worked and what had happened before and what was happening in other realms or what the future might hold. But he deliberately put that all aside and said, well, let's talk about what's really useful instead. Like there's this well-known dialogue between the Buddha and Molunkyaputta. And Molunkyaputta, he was a fellow who became a monk with the Buddha. And after a while of being a member of the monastic community, he gets kind of fed up with the Buddha, because he says, well, I've been around, I've been listening to him give Dhamma talks, but he won't say anything about the origin of the world, or he won't say about what happens to an enlightened being after an arahant passes away, or you never get anything about all this stuff. He wouldn't tell it to lay people. I thought if I went into robes, you get the kind of inside story. And so Molunkyaputta then after a while he goes to the Buddha and says, well, I'm really upset because you never talk about these things. What is the origin of the world, and what's the nature of the relationship between the world and the self? Is the self eternal, or is the world eternal? Is the universe eternal? And what happens to an enlightened being after they die? You never say any of this stuff. And if you don't tell me, I'm going to disrobe. So there. And the Buddha said, "Well, Malunkyya Buddha, when you went forth as a monk, did we make an arrangement that if you went forth, I would agree to tell you these things?" He says, "Well, no, Venerable Sir." So what are you doing, saying that you're going to you're trying to sort of blackmail me into answering these questions, and that they're threatening me that you're going to disrobe? And then he continues the dialogue. He kind of puts Malunkyya Buddha in his place, first of all, and says, "Look, we didn't make a deal of that nature, so what are you complaining about? That you might want to know about those things, you might be curious, but I never said that I would tell you that." And he said, he says, "I don't tell you those things, because they're not conducive towards clarity. They're not conducive towards peacefulness. They're not conducive towards dispassion. They don't lead towards understanding and towards simplicity and direct knowledge. That's why I don't teach them." He doesn't say that they're not interesting, or he doesn't say that there's nothing to say, but he just says, "I don't teach that because it's not helpful." But what do I teach? He says, "I teach dukkha, the origin of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the way leading to the cessation of dukkha. That's what I teach." Why do I teach that? Why is that revealed? Because that leads to a clarity of understanding. It leads to peacefulness. It leads to contentment. It leads to liberation. It leads to nibbana. That's why I teach it. He says, "Malunkyya Buddha, say, imagine there was a soldier on the battlefield, and this soldier is shot with a poisoned arrow, and so he's lying there on the battlefield with this poisoned arrow stuck in him. And then the field surgeon comes up and is about to pull the arrow out, and then the wounded soldier says, "No, I forbid you to pull the arrow out until you find out the name of the man who shot me. Yeah, and not only the name of the man who shot me, I want to find out the name of his parents and his grandparents on both sides, and I want to you should find out the name of the village and the district and the country that he came from, and not only that, but I want to know, the kind of wood that the arrow is made from. Is it aloe wood? Is it oak wood? Is it pine wood? Is it yew wood? And not only that, I need to know the kind of bird that the feathers came from. Is it a peacock feathers? Are they goose feathers? Are they chicken feathers? Are they cuckoo feathers?" And the Buddha, he can really lay it on. So he riffs on this theme for like about a page and a half. Like every single thing, it's like the kind of arrow tip. Is it a horse-hoofed arrow tip, or is it a monkey fist arrow tip, or is it an anchor arrow tip, or and the kind of arrow tip, the kind of sinews that the arrowhead is wrapped with, the whole deal. And this is Malunkyya Buddha. By the time that the surgeon had answered all these questions, the soldier would necessarily have died. So this is why, I don't answer these questions, is because, that the point is pull the arrow out and treat the wound, and then your life can be saved. That all the rest is extraneous, is unnecessary. So this is a very well-known and famous teaching, and I feel for a very useful purpose. And I confess that I used to think that, well, you get this kind of stingy deal. When you hear the teachings in the Buddha, you get this. He wouldn't pass on all this information about what happens to an enlightened being when they die, or what's the origin of the universe. But I'm sure he actually did pass it on. There was this kind of secret knowledge, that the inner circle, the kind of cognoscenti that. He must have passed it on. There's this whole school of secret knowledge that's been, having grown up with the kind of Madame Blavatsky kind of school of Buddhism, and the Rudolf Steiner type world of sort of mystical and mythological and mysterious secrets being sort of passed from one generation to another. I thought maybe he told Rahula. You don't hear much about Rahula. After he becomes an arahant, he kind of disappears from the plot. So maybe he told all that stuff to Rahula, and then he passed it on. There's this secret kind of school of knowledge that Rahula's passed on, off in the Himalayas with Master Kutumi, in some Himalayan valley that's hidden away. And yes, that's it. And so I confess I used to dwell on these kind of imaginings for some time. And then after a while I began to realize, no, it's extremely unlikely. And that maybe the Buddha actually meant what he said and said, I don't teach that stuff because it isn't helpful. And that wherever Madame Blavatsky got all her stuff from, I don't think it was from the Buddha. And that the stress, the emphasis he was giving was really on what is useful. And that he said, it's not as though I don't know all this stuff. And other people, accused him, so, well, you don't talk about this stuff because you don't really know it. And he said, it's not because I don't know it. I do know it, but I don't pass it on because it's not helpful. And so this image of the wounded soldier lying on the battlefield saying, and another thing, I need to know what kind of animal the sinew came from that wraps the arrowhead. You can very easily picture that and think, duh, just let the doctor take the arrow out. And so it gives a very substantial message to us. It says you don't need to know the origin of the universe. You don't need to know sort of what's going to happen to all beings sort of way off in the incalculably distant future. It might be, it might be curious or it might be interesting to have a picture of that. But right now, we can experience there is this attachment to this feeling, the struggling with the pain in my knee, or the need to go to the bathroom, or the struggling with a long-standing compulsion or obsession or a worrying thought. So, right now, it's not a matter of where all beings have come from, where they're all going. Right now, there's this worry of, did I pay that bill? Or right now, there's this worry of the pain in my knee. Is that just a little kind of itch because of where I'm sitting now, or is that some kind of systemic damage that is irreversible? That's what's happening now. Well, it's not, but that immediate sense of separation from the loved, dukkha, association with the unloved, dukkha. That's what we can see and know directly, and that's all we need to know. And so, to me, this is one of the most powerful and helpful. It's like the Buddha's genius, in a way, to recognize you don't need to have a picture of the whole thing. You don't need to be able to write mathematical equations for what every instrument in the orchestra is doing, the vibration of the air inside the violins, or the particular harmonics of the catgut vibrating on the violin strings. All you need to know is they're playing A flat, and I just played a C sharp. I got the wrong note. That's all you need to know, is that just what's harmonious, what's disharmonious, and that the rest is extra. The rest is unnecessary. And so that the Buddha very deliberately confined his attention to a small area of a vast range of knowledge, and that to say, this is all we need to know. So, and he knew he was going to be misunderstood. He knew he was going to be criticized. Or the people would say, well, you don't really, if you really knew, you would say, or if you, why don't you describe, obviously if someone's an arahant and they're totally enlightened, surely after they pass away, they're going to go to some really, really, really nice kind of super duper heaven forever. I mean, surely, right? I mean, there must be some kind of special super duper reward. I mean, after all that, they can't just, disappear. And he said, there's nothing can be said. Come on, you can tell me. I won't pass it on. But the Buddha never answers that question. He says, there's nothing that can be said. He said that to say such an enlightened one that they exist after the death of the body, that doesn't apply. To say they don't exist, that doesn't apply. To say they both exist and they neither exist, nor do not exist, doesn't apply. That they both exist and not exist, that doesn't apply either. Because you can't, words and concepts can't define the reality of things. Therefore, there's no point speaking about it. So when people would hear that, they say, "Oh, come on, you don't really know," or like, "Yeah, I mean, so that they disappear." Like, no, that's not it. It's that words and concepts can't define the reality. But so he was misunderstood, and he was ready to accept that. It's better to be misunderstood or be misrepresented than to present a picture which is inaccurate, which is not true, not realistic. So he just said, "You don't need to know. It's not necessary to have an idea about it. Just do the necessary, learn how to play in tune, and all the rest will follow." And there's a couple of places on that particular issue where you get a slight hint, where, like when Dabba the Malian passed away, he said that such a one, when at the ending of the lifespan, what is experienced is unutterable bliss. Well, that sounds good. So how, where, what? So, no, you don't get any more than that. All he says is unutterable bliss, but that's as much of a clue in the entire canon as you get of what quality is experienced, or what kind of happens. And to me, I felt that was, again, first of all, I thought it was pretty stingy. I thought, well, why didn't he say something? I mean, if that's sort of where an enlightened being can sort of what they can expect to experience at the end of it all, why didn't he say something? And but yet, in time, I began to realize that it was a tremendous blessing and a great wisdom of his to say, "You don't need to know. There's nothing needs to be said. Just do the work, and all of that will reveal itself in good time. You'll find out for yourself. You don't have to give a description of what life on the other shore is like. So just get across, get across to the other shore, and then everything will reveal itself. It will be known directly." So in this respect, I feel it's important to practice in that spirit and say, okay, well, I can just bring my attention to this task in this moment, to watch dukkha as it arises, in this moment to watch dukkha as it ceases, and to know how that works, to give attention to that. And if that's understood, if that's really developed as a skill, then all the rest is gravy. Everything else is extra. So, like with playing using again the analogy of playing in an orchestra, just to be able to know the piece of music, to know how to play your instrument, to be able to discern if you're going too fast or too slow, or if you're too sharp or too flat, and to know when things are in harmony. That's all we need to know, and that the rest is by the way. And if we pay attention to that particular task, then we learn how to do that really well. Our attention isn't getting scattered over unnecessary things, but we learn our instrument really well. We learn to attune our ear to see when it's too fast or too slow or too sharp or too flat, and then we are able to really play harmoniously. And then we realize, this is everything that was needed. And so in the teachings of dependent origination, what we have is this maps out the arising of dukkha, how that disharmony appears, how we get out of tune with the rest of the orchestra, and then how we can harmonize. That it's all spelled out right here in this list of connected terms, and in a sense, this is all we really need to know. This much, how to play in tune, how to bring our life into harmony with the world around us, with our own physical being, with our own past conditioning, and with the world around us and the people that we live with. That's all we need to do. Where it all came from, where it's all going, we don't need to dwell upon that. And the genius of the Buddha, I feel, is in confining his attention just to this one essential task. Then you're able to really learn that. Well, you see, that's the main thing. That's what's most important, and that when we do that, then that brings tremendous blessings for ourselves. It brings a quality of a real contentment and a sensitivity to others around us. And even though it's not talking about particularly about our livelihood or what we are, doing day to day, when we establish that kind of harmony, we establish that kind of an attunement, then that affects everything that we do. It affects every conversation that we have, every encounter that we have, the people that we are with on the road, just the other cars that we meet, the people in our family, the people that we work with. That if our life is in tune, if our life is harmonious, then every area of our life, every aspect of the world that we touch is affected by that and is benefited by that. So this attunement reaches into every dimension of our experience. And then similarly, it's not just a blessing to us, but it becomes a blessing to everybody that we share this life with. So I think that's enough to chew on for this evening. For these thoughts for consideration.